Welcome back. I'm trying to get caught up on these videos, and so we're going to be jumping back into where we left off. Remember that video 41 will have an A, B, and C. I need to correct the title for the last video. I uploaded it in the same title, but anyway, a fun fact, since I'm wearing my sweatshirt now that we're in the evening time, this is Lincoln City, Oregon. When my husband and I travel, we like to, which we love to do, we like to buy hoodies or sweatshirts as something that's practical and useful as a souvenir, so we can have that and take home. So I'm a very practical person. I don't like to buy things unless I need them, so I just thought I would share that. I have several from the places that we've traveled in Kentucky, Tennessee, Florida, Oregon, Texas, Arkansas, anywhere that we decide to go, even on a weekend trip, we bring home hoodies, so something practical. Anyway, we're going to jump into Matthew 12. We're going to begin in verse 9, and again, I'm going to read from Matthew, Mark, and Luke. Then we will go through and discuss each of these and how they correlate together and what we can get from them. So let's get started in Matthew 12:9. Okay. Oops, I'm sorry, I bumped the camera. Now, when he had departed from there, he went into their synagogue, and behold, there was a man who had a withered hand. And they asked him, saying, Is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath? That they might accuse him. Then he said to them, What man is there among you who has one sheep, and if it falls into a pit on the Sabbath, will not lay a hold of it and lift it out? How much more value is this man than a sheep? Therefore it is lawful to do good on the Sabbath. Then he said to them, Stretch out your hand. And he stretched it out, and it was restored as whole as the other. Then the Pharisees went out and plotted against him, how they might destroy him. Let's go into Mark now. We're actually going to begin in chapter 3, verse 1. And he entered the synagogue again, and a man was there who had a withered hand. So they watched him closely, whether he would heal him on the Sabbath, so that they might accuse him. And he said to the man who had withered hand, Step forward. Then he said to them, Is it lawful on Sabbath to do good or to do evil, to save a life or to kill? But they kept silent. And when he had looked around at them with anger, being grieved by the hardness of their hearts, he said to the man, Stretch out your hand. And he stretched it out. His hand was restored as whole as the other. Then the Pharisees went out and immediately plotted with the Herodians against him, and how they might destroy him. And let's jump on over to Luke 6, and we will begin in verse 6. Okay? Now it happened on another Sabbath also that he entered their synagogue and taught. And a man was there whose right hand was withered. So the scribes and the Pharisees watched him closely, whether he would heal on the Sabbath, that they might find an accusation against him. But he knew their thoughts, and he said to the man who had a withered hand, Arise and stand here. And he arose and stood. And then Jesus said to them, I will ask you one thing. Is it lawful on the Sabbath to do good or to do evil, to save a life or to destroy? And when he had looked around at them all, he said to the man, Stretch out your hand. And he did so, and his hand was restored as whole as the other. But they were filled with rage, and they discussed with one another what they might do to Jesus. So it's a good thing that we're seeing all three perspectives here, because we got a little bit different information from each one, such as, let's go into Mark 3. Okay, he said that the Pharisees plotted with the Herodians. Okay, on a political scale, the Pharisees and the Herodians are on the complete opposite. So the fact that they are joining together against what they consider their common enemy, which is Jesus, is a huge thing. So they are, like I said, they are enemies, and they would rather team with their enemies, okay, than to agree with or believe in Jesus Christ. It's wild. And so let's see here. They plotted against him. So I want to show you in Matthew, let me just go ahead and tell you what the other part that was different in Luke. Luke mentions, let's get over here. So he healed on the Sabbath. I'm sorry, I lost my place. Okay, so we began in verse 6. Luke tells us here that when he entered the synagogue, number one, it happened on another Sabbath. Remember, we read as if it's consecutively happening, all in the same time, same day, whatever it is. But Luke specifically tells us this was another Sabbath. And we finished before, Jesus is the Lord of Sabbath, okay? And he was going to, he healed a man, the lame man, right? And so now this is on another Sabbath day. So some time has passed, okay? So on another Sabbath, he entered the synagogue, and what's the first thing he did? Jumped right into the miracles that I'm going to heal your hand. That's kind of the version that we got from Mark and Matthew, okay? But Luke points out specifically, he taught. Remember, teaching and preaching, then healing. And so Jesus sticks to that. He taught. He came into the synagogue to teach them. And then the healing, which is the miracles, is to show his authenticity of what he is teaching. So that was what came first. Now, I want you to recognize, we're going to see it a little bit more in Luke and in Matthew. But for instance, in Matthew, we see that they tried to set a trap for him. So it is Matthew 12:10, okay? And behold, there was a man with a withered hand, and they asked him, saying, Is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath? That they might accuse him, okay? And we read that also in Luke. They said, So the scribes and Pharisees watched him closely, whether he would heal on the Sabbath, that they might find an accusation against him. Okay? So this was not an accident. When Jesus walked into this temple, okay, there didn't just happen to be a man there with a withered hand. The Pharisees and the scribes plotted against him. They planned for this to be there. So they would have invited this man in so that they may accuse him. And the reason we know this is because you wouldn't have multiple groups with the same thought, okay? We could have joined and had a quick, gathering of ideas, like, quick, let's throw this guy in front of him, let's all team up. It's not realistic. And the fact that Jesus said he knew their thoughts, so they're plural, so multiple, we're told this is the Pharisees and the scribes, so we have two large groups of people that are there, okay? And he knew their thoughts, which means collectively they were thinking the same thing. They had planned this. They planted this man in the temple so that they could watch Jesus and try to accuse him for what? Healing on the Sabbath. But remember that Jesus had just said at another teaching that he desires mercy and not sacrifice. So remember, healing is mercy. And he's calling them out when he tells them, who would have a sheep that would fall into a pit that you wouldn't lift him out, right? Just because it's the Sabbath, you're going to let him die? Do we live or do we die? Do we seek life or do we destroy? And so he again is proving his lordship over the Sabbath, that he fulfills the Sabbath. And so they are trying to stick to their Pharisaical law. Let's make sure. So in 12:13, okay, then he said to the man, Stretch out your hand. He stretched out his hand, and it was restored as whole as the other. Okay, very similar accounts in each one that we read here. So he said, Stretch out your hand. He stretched out his hand, and it was restored as whole as the other. I just want to touch on again, like we have spoken before in other videos, that this man did not have faith first. He did not believe in and accept Jesus Christ as his Messiah, right, as his king, the kingdom come, okay? He did not accept him first. Jesus healed him first. So what I want to gather from this and kind of distribute, oh no, on the glitching, and kind of distribute to you is that just because you are not a born-again Christian does not prevent God from working in your life, right? It prevents you from recognizing it and giving him the glory and the credit and the honor that's due for the things that he's doing in your life. You don't have the joy that comes from knowing the Lord, right? But you don't prevent the Lord from working in your life. And so even as unbelievers, what we would call in a secular world, okay, non-believing folks, God can still work in your life. And he did this here, specifically showed these miracles. They're called messianic miracles to prove his messiahship. He's the only one who can do these things. And so he healed the man first. So that's just something to notate here. Let me make sure that we don't have anything else. Nope. I just have here that they're trying to do absolutely whatever it takes to deny his messiahship, okay? And I talked about the Pharisees and the Herodians, and so they plotted against him here. That's what's happening. It's sad. They don't win, and so they didn't get very far. I will go ahead and end this one here, and we will pick right back up in the next video to finish out this story in our chronology.